I've learned something strange about people. The moment you stop trying to impress someone is usually the moment they finally see you. I didn't know that on a Tuesday morning in September. I just knew I was tired. I had a boarding pass in my hand, and I was about to sit next to the one coworker who made my chest feel tight every time she laughed at something that wasn't even funny. What I didn't know was that by the time that plane landed, would be a different man. And she would be asleep on my shoulder, and she wouldn't move. Not because she was still sleeping. Because she didn't want to. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. Ordinary life. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I worked in logistics for a mid-size shipping company, the kind of job where you become very good at spreadsheets and very bad at knowing what day it is. I'd been there 4 years. Reliable. Quiet. The guy who remembered everyone's coffee order but never actually said much at the holiday party. Her name was Mara. She worked 2 desks down, in client relations, and she had this habit of tapping her pen against her coffee cup exactly 3 times before she made a phone call, like she was psyching herself up. I noticed things like that about her. I noticed a lot of things about her, honestly, and told myself it meant nothing. We weren't friends. We were coworkers who said good morning and occasionally got stuck in the same elevator, where she'd make some dry comment about the elevator music and I'd laugh a little too hard because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I liked my life the way a man likes a house he's lived in so long he's stopped noticing the paint is peeling. Comfortable. Safe. Nothing that could hurt me because nothing in it demanded anything from me. Inciting incident. Then our regional director sent an email with the subject line, Denver Conference, Travel Assignments. And when I scrolled down to find my name next to hers, my stomach did something it hadn't done in years. 3 days. 1 conference. And a flight, the same flight, because apparently corporate travel decided saving $400 was worth putting 2 coworkers next to each other for 2.5 hours in economy class. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself a lot of things that week that turned out to be lies. Unexpected meeting. The morning of the flight, I got to the gate early, the way I always do, because I like watching planes take off before I have to get on one myself. There's something calming about it. Something that doesn't ask anything of you. That's when I saw her. She was sitting near the window, headphones in, a paperback novel open on her lap that she wasn't actually reading. Her eyes were somewhere else, somewhere far past the tarmac. She looked smaller than she did at the office. Not physically. Just unguarded. Like she'd forgotten someone might be watching. Didn't peg you for early, I said, sitting 2 seats away, not too close. She pulled one earbud out. Didn't peg you for a stalker. I've been here 40 minutes before you. So the real stalker was you all along. She almost smiled. Almost. I remember thinking, there it is. That thing I liked. The way she could take a joke and hand it back to you sharper. Comfort. We didn't sit together right away, boarding groups, different rows, but somewhere over Ohio, a flight attendant asked if I'd mind switching seats so a family could sit together. I said sure, grabbed my bag, and walked 4 rows back. Straight into 14C. Right next to Mara. Small world, she said, not looking up from her book. Small plane, I said. She laughed. A real one this time. Short, surprised out of her. For the first 20 minutes we didn't talk much. She read. I pretended to work on my laptop, though I mostly stared at the same paragraph of a quarterly report I'd already read 3 times. But something about sitting next to her felt different than sitting next to her at the office. There were no desks between us. No emails. Just her elbow occasionally brushing mine on the armrest, and neither of us moving away from it. "You always this quiet on planes?" she asked eventually. "I don't like flying much." She turned, actually looked at me for the first time. "You're kidding. Mr. Never Late, Mr. Perfect Attendance is scared of flying?" I didn't say scared. I said I don't like it. That's the same thing with extra steps. I laughed, and something in my chest loosened, just slightly, like a knot that had been there so long I'd forgotten it was tied. "Trust." "Okay," she said, closing her book. "Tell me something real. Not office small talk. Something true." That's a big ask for row 14. We've got 2 more hours. Might as well spend it being human instead of coworkers. So I told her. About my dad, who used to say silence was the loudest way to say something mattered, and how I'd built my whole personality around not needing anyone to worry about me. About how I picked this job because it was safe, not because I loved it. Small things. True things. Things I hadn't said out loud in years, not even to people who'd known me for a decade. She listened the way some people never learn to, without waiting for her turn to talk. Then she told me about her mother's diagnosis 2 years ago. How she'd taken this job partly because the schedule let her drive upstate every other weekend. How people at the office thought she was tough, unshakable, and how exhausting it was to be admired for something that was really just fear wearing a nice outfit. "Nobody at the office knows that," she said quietly. "I won't say anything. I know." And she meant it. I could tell she meant it. Emotional vulnerability. Somewhere after that, the turbulence started. Not bad. Just enough to rattle a drink cart and make the seatbelt sign chime on. She reached over without thinking and grabbed my hand. Then she realized what she'd done and let go, embarrassed. "Sorry." Reflex. I don't mind being a reflex. She looked at me like she was deciding something. Recalculating something. "You're not who I thought you were," she said. "Who'd you think I was? The guy who remembers everyone's coffee order and disappears the second the conversation gets interesting. And now?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked out the window, at the clouds moving past like slow gray rivers, and said, "Now I don't know. And I don't hate not knowing." That was the moment. If I had to point to one single moment where everything changed, it was that one, a woman admitting she didn't have me figured out, and somehow that felt more intimate than if she'd said something soft and easy instead. Romantic chemistry. We talked for another hour like that. About music, about the worst first dates we'd ever been on, about the strange specific loneliness of eating dinner alone in a city where you know 100 people but call none of them. She laughed at my terrible joke about airline peanuts. I laughed at her impression of our regional director's voice, which was frighteningly accurate. Every few minutes there'd be a pause, not awkward, just full, where we'd both just sit there, aware that something had shifted, neither of us naming it. At one point her hand rested on the armrest, and mine did too, close enough that our fingers were almost touching, and I remember being more nervous about that half-inch of space than I'd been about any first date in years. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead. Why didn't you ever ask me to get coffee? Like actually ask. Not the elevator small talk." I considered lying. I didn't. Because I didn't think someone like you would say yes to someone like me. She was quiet for a second. That's the dumbest thing you've said all flight. High bar, considering the peanut joke. She smiled, but it faded into something more serious. I would have said yes. I would have said yes a year ago. I didn't know what to do with that sentence except let it sit there between us, glowing like something I wasn't ready to touch yet. Conflict. Then her phone buzzed. She'd put it in airplane mode, but apparently it hadn't fully switched, because a text came through right as she glanced down, from someone saved simply as D. Her face changed. Just slightly. A door closing behind her eyes. Everything okay? Yeah. Just, she put the phone face down. It's complicated. You don't have to explain. His name's Daniel. We used to date. It ended badly, but she exhaled. He still thinks there's an us to go back to. And I keep meaning to tell him clearly that there isn't, and I keep not doing it, because I don't like conflict, and now it's been months of me being a coward about one conversation. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not because I thought she still loved him, I could hear in her voice that she didn't, but because it made the last 2 hours feel suddenly fragile. Like something that could evaporate the second the wheels touched ground and real life came rushing back in. I shouldn't have told you that, she said. This was supposed to be a nice flight. It still is. But something had shifted. She got quieter. She put her earbuds back in, not to shut me out, I think, but to shut herself up, to stop herself from saying something she wasn't ready to say. And I sat there next to her, watching the clouds, wondering if I'd just watched a door open and close in the same breath. Healing. Somewhere over Kansas, exhaustion caught up with her. Her head started drifting, that particular sleepy nod people do when they're fighting it and losing. Then, slowly, without any announcement, her head came to rest on my shoulder. I froze. Every instinct told me to sit perfectly still, like moving might break the moment, might send her jolting upright and apologizing. She didn't wake up. For a while I just sat there, feeling the weight of her, the way her breathing slowed and evened out, the small furrow between her eyebrows finally smoothing away. I thought about Daniel. I thought about how she'd called herself a coward for avoiding one hard conversation, and how maybe I understood that better than she knew, because I'd spent 4 years avoiding a much smaller one, the one where I told her I noticed her. Really noticed her. I didn't wake her. I just let her sleep, and somewhere in that quiet, I made a decision. Not a big dramatic one. Just a small private one. Whatever happened after this flight, I wasn't going back to pretending. Love. About 40 minutes before landing, she stirred. Her eyes opened halfway, disoriented, and she realized where her head was. She didn't move. I felt her breathing change, not the panic of someone caught doing something embarrassing, but something slower. Deliberate. She lifted her head just enough to look at me, our faces closer than they'd ever been, close enough that I could count the small gold flecks in her brown eyes. I should apologize for drooling on your shoulder, she said quietly. You didn't. Good, because I wasn't going to apologize anyway. I laughed softly, and something in the air between us went very still, the way it does right before something important happens. Can I tell you something? I said. You've been telling me things all flight. Not this one. She waited. I've had a crush on you since your first week at the company. 3 years and 8 months, roughly. I counted once, which is embarrassing to admit out loud. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me, and her eyes went a little glassy, like she was deciding whether to believe something good could actually be true. 3 years and 8 months, she repeated, and you never said anything. I was a coward. Same as you and Daniel. Different conversation, same fear. So what changed? You fell asleep on my shoulder and didn't move when you woke up. The corner of her mouth lifted. Maybe I wasn't asleep the whole time. The captain's voice crackled overhead, announcing our descent into Denver, and neither of us looked away from each other. The plane began its slow tilt downward, and I remember thinking that everything important in my life up to that point had happened quietly, without fanfare, and this was no different, just 2 people in row 14, finally saying the true thing instead of the safe thing. When the wheels touched the runway, she reached over and laced her fingers through mine. For the record, she said, I would have said yes a year ago. I'm saying yes now, too. Future commitment. We didn't kiss on the plane. Some moments deserve patience. But that night, after the conference's opening dinner, we ended up walking the same 3 blocks back to the hotel, slower than we needed to, neither of us in a hurry to end the day. Outside my hotel room door, under a flickering hallway light that made the whole scene feel like something out of an old movie, she finally kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, certain, like something that had been true for a long time and was just now being spoken. The Denver trip lasted 3 days. We spent every free hour together, walking through a bookstore near the convention center, arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, sitting on a park bench while she told me the whole complicated story about Daniel, and how, 2 days after we landed, she finally sent that overdue text, closing a door she'd been too afraid to close for months. Back at the office, we didn't hide it, though we didn't announce it either. People noticed anyway, the way I started remembering not just her coffee order but the exact way she liked to complain about Mondays, the way she started leaving sticky notes on my monitor with terrible puns. 8 months later, on a weekend trip upstate to see her mother, who was doing better than anyone had expected, I asked her to marry me on the same porch where she used to sit as a kid, looking out at a field that reminded her, she said, of the clouds outside an airplane window. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. Emotional closure. Sometimes I think about that flight. About the version of me who almost switched seats back, who almost let the moment pass because that's what I always did, let good things pass quietly so they wouldn't have the chance to disappoint me. I think about how close I came to spending my whole life remembering her as the coworker who fell asleep on my shoulder once, instead of the woman who is now, 4 years later, still the first person I want to tell things to. People ask us how we got together, expecting some big romantic story, a grand gesture, a dramatic confession. And we just look at each other and laugh, because the truth is smaller and somehow bigger than that. She fell asleep on my shoulder during a flight. And when we landed, she didn't move. Sometimes the biggest moments in life don't announce themselves with music swelling in the background. Sometimes they're just a woman choosing to stay still, and a man finally choosing to say the true thing instead of the safe one. So let me ask you something, the way she asked me on that plane, somewhere over Ohio, when she said we might as well spend the time being human instead of strangers. Have you ever had a moment like that, small, quiet, easy to miss, that ended up changing everything? Have you ever been the one who stayed still, hoping the other person wouldn't move away? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Because somewhere out there, someone else is sitting in row 14 right now, too afraid to say the true thing. Maybe this is the sign they needed not to wait 3 years and 8 months like I did.